I was 8 years old when I first realized that something inside me didn't quite match what the world expected. The year was 2002, and life was simpler in many ways, but infinitely more complicated in others. Growing up in a small, conservative town, my family lived what most would call a traditional life. My parents were loving and supportive, yet the environment I was raised in left little room for deviation from societal norms. From a young age, I knew that I was different. Not in the obvious ways that people often talk about, but in the subtle, quiet moments I experienced alone. When other boys were obsessing over action figures and sports, I found myself drawn to softer, more delicate things. The way the fabric of my mother's clothes shimmered when she moved, the comforting scent of her perfume as it filled the house, the way her laughter seemed to float like music. But none of these feelings had clear labels at that age. I didn't understand what any of it meant, and I certainly didn't have the words to explain it. At that time, I was more of an observer than a participant in life. I would watch my sister, Emma, as she practiced for her ballet recitals. She was 3 years older than me and everything a perfect little girl should be: graceful, pretty, confident, and always smiling. My parents would proudly watch her twirl and leap in her pink tutu, beaming with joy. I admired her in ways I couldn't explain back then. Part of me was envious of the freedom she seemed to have, the ease with which she existed in the world of femininity that was denied to me simply because I was born a boy. It was during one of those ballet practice sessions that the idea first occurred to me. My mother had left the laundry basket by the doorway, and among the clothes was one of Emma's older dresses, a yellow sundress she had outgrown. I stood there, staring at it, feeling an inexplicable pull, as though it were calling my name. It seemed innocent enough, but the weight of the moment was far greater than I could have ever imagined. That dress represented something more, a key to unlocking a part of myself I had kept hidden even from me. I remember standing in the hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt like I was on the brink of something huge, though I didn't quite understand what it was. The house was quiet, with my mother in the kitchen and my sister at ballet. No one was around to see me. I glanced at the dress again, then back at the empty hallway. It would only take a second, I reasoned. I would try it on, just for a moment, and no one would ever know. Slowly, I reached out and picked up the sundress. The fabric was soft in my hands, delicate and light. My fingers trembled as I held it up to my body. For a moment, I hesitated. What if someone walked in? What if my mom or dad caught me? My stomach knotted at the thought, but the desire to experience that moment was stronger than my fear. I slipped the dress over my head, the material brushing against my skin as it settled around me. It was a little too big, hanging loosely on my small frame, but that didn't matter. The feeling of wearing a dress for the first time was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was like a puzzle piece falling into place, a sudden click in my brain that made sense of so much confusion I didn't know I had. In that instant, I wasn't pretending to be someone else. I was simply being me. I stood in front of the hallway mirror, frozen in awe of my reflection. The boys staring back at me seemed different. Sure, I still looked like myself, messy brown hair, skinny arms, a face too young to be burdened with questions of identity. But the dress transformed me in a way I couldn't articulate. It wasn't about becoming someone new. It was about discovering a part of myself that had always been there, waiting for me to find it. As I twirled around, the dress fluttered around my legs, and I couldn't help but smile. I had seen Emma do this a million times, her own dresses flowing gracefully as she danced around the room. Now, for the first time, I understood why it made her so happy. There was a lightness in wearing a dress, not just in the fabric, but in the freedom it represented. It was as if, for the first time, I was free from the expectations the world had placed on me, free to just be. I stayed like that for what felt like hours, but in reality, it was probably only a few minutes. Time didn't matter. What mattered was that, in those precious moments, I was experiencing something pure, something right. But that sense of calm and euphoria couldn't last forever. Reality always finds a way to intrude, and soon I heard the unmistakable sound of the front door opening. My heart leaped into my throat, and I quickly yanked the dress off, throwing it back into the laundry basket just as my mother walked into the hallway. I don't know if she noticed the flush in my cheeks or the way I quickly darted away from the basket, but she didn't say anything. She simply smiled at me and asked if I wanted a snack. I nodded, barely able to speak, as the adrenaline from my near miss coursed through me. I knew I had dodged a bullet, but that didn't change what had just happened. Something inside me had shifted, and there was no going back. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed the moment over and over again in my mind. The way the dress had felt, the way I had looked, the way I had felt. It was like discovering a secret about myself that I wasn't ready to share with anyone, not even my own consciousness. It was thrilling and terrifying at the same time. For weeks, I didn't dare touch any of my sister's clothes again, though the temptation was always there. Every time I passed by the laundry basket or peeked into her room, I felt that same pull. But the fear of being caught kept me in check. I wasn't ready to confront what that moment had awakened in me. As I grew older, that single experience became a pivotal memory, one that shaped how I understood myself and my identity. It wasn't until my teenage years that I fully grasped what it had meant. The world was slowly starting to talk more openly about gender and identity, but I still felt isolated. I didn't have the vocabulary to explain the way I felt, and there were no role models around to help me navigate the confusing emotions swirling inside me. In high school, the pressure to conform to traditional gender roles became even more intense. I tried to fit in, tried to be the person everyone expected me to be. I played sports, hung out with the guys, and dated girls like any other normal teenage boy. But the part of me that had worn that yellow sundress never went away. It lingered beneath the surface, quietly aching to be acknowledged. My relationship with clothing became more complex as the years went on. I developed an obsession with fashion, specifically women's fashion. I would spend hours online, scrolling through images of dresses, skirts, and blouses, imagining what it would be like to wear them. But every time I thought about actually doing it, that old fear of being caught would bubble up, reminding me of the risk. It wasn't until college that I finally found the courage to embrace that part of myself again. Living on my own for the first time gave me the freedom to explore my identity in ways I hadn't been able to before. I started small, trying on clothes in the privacy of my dorm room, experimenting with makeup, even growing out my hair. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that I had been forced to bury for so long. I joined an online community of crossdressers and transgender individuals, finally finding a space where I could be honest about my feelings without fear of judgment. It was through that community that I learned the language I had been missing all those years, the words that helped me understand who I was. I wasn't just a boy who liked wearing dresses. I was someone who didn't fit neatly into the box society had assigned to me. The first time I went out in public wearing a dress was both exhilarating and terrifying. It wasn't the yellow sundress from my childhood, but a soft blue summer dress that flowed just the way I had always imagined. My heart raced as I stepped out of my apartment, half expecting someone to point at me and laugh, or worse, confront me. But no one did. People walked by me without a second glance, and I realized that the fear I had carried for so long was largely unfounded. That day marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one where I no longer felt the need to hide who I was. I started dressing how I wanted, not just in private but in public, too. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of doubt, moments when I questioned whether I was brave enough to live authentically. But every time I slipped into a dress, I felt that same sense of rightness that I had experienced all those years ago in my childhood home. Today, I look back on that first time wearing a dress with a mixture of nostalgia and gratitude. It was a small, seemingly insignificant moment in the grand scheme of things, but it changed the course of my life. That yellow sundress wasn't just a piece of clothing. It was a symbol of self-discovery, a quiet rebellion against the rigid expectations placed upon me. If I could go back and talk to that 8-year-old boy standing nervously in the hallway, I would tell him that it's okay to be different. I would tell him that the world is bigger than he realizes, and that there are people out there who will love and accept him for exactly who he is. Most importantly, I would tell him that the journey he's about to embark on, though difficult and confusing at times, will ultimately lead him to a place of self-acceptance and joy. Wearing a dress for the first time didn't just change the way I saw myself. It opened up a world of possibilities. It taught me that identity isn't something that can be neatly defined or confined to a single label. It's fluid, ever-changing, and deeply personal. And while society may try to tell us who we should be, only we have the power to decide who we truly are. The first time I wore a dress was the first time I truly saw myself. It was the first step on a journey that continues to this day, a journey of self-discovery, self-expression, and, ultimately, self-love. Thank you so much for watching till now. It means the world to have you here. This community is all about empowering each other and celebrating the incredible journeys of everyone on their path to living authentically. If you're ever feeling lost or alone, remember you have a whole family here for you. Hit that subscribe button, smash that like button, and let's keep inspiring each other, sending you all the love and strength in the world. Until next time, live your life by your rules.